Peter Holloway stood by the expansive window of his law office, overlooking the bustling city that was his playground and battlefield. At 55, he was at the pinnacle of his career, a formidable attorney with a reputation for winning the unwinnable cases. Peter's personal life seemed to mirror the perfection of his professional achievements. He lived in a beautiful home in an affluent neighborhood, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. His wife, Sherry, was the picture of elegance and grace, the perfect complement to his ambitious spirit. The story of Peter and Sherry's relationship was one of serendipity and romance. They met at a charity gala over 2 decades ago, where Peter was instantly captivated by Sherry's intelligence and warmth. Their courtship was a whirlwind of dinners at exquisite restaurants, long walks in the park, and weekends exploring art galleries and theaters. They married within a year, and their wedding was a grand affair, attended by friends, family, and Peter's colleagues from the legal world. Over the years, Peter and Sherry built a life filled with shared dreams and mutual respect. They traveled the world together, hosted elegant gatherings, and were active in their community, known for their philanthropy and charm. Their social circle included prominent figures from the legal, business, and art worlds, all of whom admired the couple's dedication to each other and their shared vision for the future. As the annual family dinner approached, Peter found himself filled with anticipation. This gathering was a cherished tradition, an opportunity to bring together loved ones and celebrate the bonds of family and friendship. This year, Peter had an extra reason to look forward to the event. He had big news to share, something he believed would bring even more joy to their lives. However, in the days leading up to the dinner, Peter began to notice subtle changes in Sherry's behavior. At first, they were small things: missed phone calls, vague explanations for late nights, a certain distance in her eyes when they talked. Peter's instincts, honed from years of assessing truth from deception, sensed that something was amiss. The thought gnawed at him, a persistent itch that he couldn't ignore. Sherry's increasing secrecy became more apparent. She started spending more evenings away, claiming work commitments or sudden plans with friends. When Peter inquired, her answers were often curt, lacking the warmth and openness that once defined their conversations. The once vibrant exchanges over dinner turned into silence, each lost in their own thoughts, an invisible wall slowly building between them. As a lawyer, Peter was trained to be observant, to notice the details that others might overlook. His mind began piecing together the inconsistencies in Sherry's stories, forming a puzzle that he was determined to solve. Without alerting her to his suspicions, he started gathering information, his methodical approach serving him well in this personal investigation. Peter discreetly checked phone records and reviewed credit card statements, noting unfamiliar charges and calls to numbers he didn't recognize. His heart sank as he uncovered a pattern that suggested a secret life unfolding beneath the surface of their marriage. Each piece of evidence was a blow, eroding the foundation of trust they had built over the years. One evening, while Sherry was out, Peter sat at his desk, poring over the data he had collected. His hands trembled slightly as he opened her laptop, searching for confirmation of his worst fears. It didn't take long for him to find what he was looking for: text messages between Sherry and a man named Gerald. Their exchanges filled with a familiarity and intimacy that cut Peter to the core. Reading through the messages, Peter felt a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, disbelief. The words on the screen were a stark contrast to the life he thought he knew, a revelation that threatened to unravel everything he held dear. Yet, even amidst the turmoil, Peter's mind began to calculate his next move, his legal training urging him to remain calm and strategic. He knew that confronting Sherry in anger would accomplish nothing. Instead, he resolved to gather more information, to understand the full extent of her betrayal before taking action. Peter's mind, ever the strategist, began crafting a plan, one that would ensure he remained in control of the situation and protect his interests. As the day of the family dinner drew closer, Peter steeled himself for the task ahead. He would play his part, maintaining the facade of the loving husband, while behind the scenes, he orchestrated a plan that would hold Sherry accountable for her actions. The storm was brewing, and Peter was ready to face it head-on, determined to emerge stronger and wiser from the ordeal. The day of the family dinner dawned bright and clear, but inside Peter Holloway's heart, a tempest was brewing. As he went through the motions of preparing for the event, he couldn't shake the sense of anticipation and dread that had settled over him. This dinner, an annual tradition meant to celebrate family and friendship, now held a different significance for him, a stage upon which he would begin to unravel the web of deceit that had entangled his life. Peter spent the morning overseeing the final touches in the dining room, ensuring everything was perfect. The table was set with fine crystal, candles flickering softly against the backdrop of the room's elegant decor. The aroma of roasted lamb and fresh herbs wafted through the house, mingling with the faint notes of classical music playing in the background. To any observer, it was a picture of domestic bliss, a gathering of loved ones sharing in the warmth of the season. Yet beneath the surface, Peter felt the cold weight of betrayal. He'd spent the last few days meticulously planning how to confront Sherry and Gerald, weighing every possible outcome in his mind. He knew the risks of acting impulsively, and his lawyer's training demanded a calm, calculated approach. As the hours ticked by, he steeled himself for the evening, determined to maintain his composure no matter what transpired. As the first guests began to arrive, Peter greeted them with his customary charm, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with ease. His smile never wavered, even as his mind churned with the knowledge of what he had discovered. Friends and family filled the living room, their laughter and conversation a comforting distraction from the turmoil within him. Peter moved through the crowd, engaging in small talk and ensuring everyone felt welcome, all the while keeping an eye on the clock and the door. And then, it happened. As the doors swung open once more, Peter turned to greet the latest arrivals, only to feel his heart drop into his stomach. Sherry stood in the doorway, her face a mask of practiced ease, and beside her was Gerald, introduced casually to the group as a friend. Peter's breath caught in his throat, anger and disbelief surging through him. The audacity of their deception, the brazen disregard for their life together, was staggering. Peter forced himself to remain composed, extending a hand to Gerald with the same warmth he offered everyone else. The grip was firm, his eyes locked onto Gerald's with an intensity that belied his calm demeanor. As the introductions were made, Peter felt as though he were observing the scene from a distance, detached and clinical, his mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and the need for retribution. Sherry's gaze met his, and for a brief moment, Peter saw a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, or guilt. But she quickly masked it with a smile, guiding Gerald into the room and introducing him to their friends and family. Peter watched her closely, noting the tension in her posture, the way her eyes darted around the room as if seeking reassurance. As the dinner bell rang, guests made their way to the table, taking seats amid laughter and light conversation. Peter took his place at the head of the table, Sherry beside him and Gerald seated further down. The atmosphere was warm and convivial, a celebration of connection and camaraderie. But for Peter, each word exchanged, each clink of glass and fork, felt like an echo of the storm raging within him. Determined to maintain control, Peter engaged in conversation, his voice steady and measured. He asked Gerald about his work, probing gently, his questions layered with double meanings that only he and Sherry understood. "So, Gerald," Peter began, his tone conversational, "I hear you're quite the traveler. What brings you to our part of the world?" Gerald smiled, seemingly oblivious to the underlying tension. "Oh, just visiting some old friends and making new ones," he replied easily. "It's always nice to expand one's horizons. Wouldn't you agree, Peter?" "Indeed," Peter replied, his gaze flicking briefly to Sherry. "It's important to explore new territories, though one must be careful not to tread where they shouldn't." The conversation continued, Peter skillfully guiding it with the precision of a seasoned litigator, each question a subtle reminder of his awareness. He watched as Sherry grew increasingly uncomfortable, her laughter strained and her responses clipped. The guests, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued to enjoy the evening, their chatter filling the room. As the main course was served, Peter felt a shift in the atmosphere. The laughter grew louder, the toasts more frequent, as wine flowed freely and the mood lightened. But beneath the surface, the tension between Peter, Sherry, and Gerald simmered, a silent battle playing out in glances and words unspoken. Peter raised his glass, signaling for a toast. To family, he declared, his voice carrying over the table, and to the bonds that hold us together, even in the face of adversity. The guests raised their glasses, echoing his words, unaware of the deeper meaning behind them. As he sipped his wine, Peter caught Sherry's eye, holding her gaze with a steady, unwavering intensity. She looked away first, her composure slipping for just a moment, a crack in the facade she had so carefully maintained. The dinner progressed, and Peter continued to engage Gerald, weaving questions into the conversation that hinted at his knowledge. "And how do you find the hospitality here, Gerald?" he asked, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. "Have you had the chance to experience all our community has to offer?" Gerald hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "It's been quite welcoming, actually," he replied cautiously. "I'm grateful for the kindness I've encountered." "Kindness is important," Peter agreed, his voice cool. "But trust is even more so, wouldn't you agree, Sherry?" Sherry's fork clattered against her plate, drawing a few curious glances from the guests. She quickly composed herself, offering a tight smile. "Of course, Peter. Trust is the foundation of any relationship." As the meal continued, Peter Holloway felt the pressure of his emotions rising like a tide, threatening to overwhelm him. The laughter and chatter of his guests faded into a distant hum, the room narrowing to a tunnel focused on Sherry and Gerald. Each bite of food felt like a betrayal, each shared joke a mocking reminder of the facade he was forced to maintain. He had played the part of the gracious host long enough, and his patience was fraying. The wine glasses clinked, and Peter felt the alcohol warm his blood, lending him a clarity that sharpened his resolve. He glanced around the table, noting the faces of those he cared about, people who had no idea of the storm that was about to break. His eyes settled on Sherry, who was engaged in conversation with Gerald, her laughter forced and brittle. The sight of her so comfortable with her betrayal ignited a spark within him, a reminder of why he needed to act, to reclaim his dignity and the truth of his life. Peter stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. He raised his glass, signaling for silence, the room gradually quieting as conversations died down and all eyes turned to him. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, the guests sensing that something significant was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Peter began, his voice steady and resonant, "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This gathering has always been a celebration of the bonds that unite us: family, friendship, loyalty." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, their weight undeniable. "And most importantly, honesty." The room was still, the tension palpable as guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what was happening. Peter's gaze swept over the table, pausing briefly on Gerald, who shifted in his seat, a hint of uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Sherry's smile froze on her face, her eyes wide as she realized the implications of his words. "In our lives," Peter continued, his voice growing stronger, "we often take these values for granted, believing that they are implicit, inviolable. But sometimes, we are forced to confront the truth that not everyone shares our understanding of these principles." A murmur ran through the room, the guests picking up on the undercurrent of tension, their attention now fully focused on Peter, Sherry, and Gerald. The silence that followed was profound, a collective breath held in anticipation of what would come next. With deliberate calm, Peter turned to Gerald, his eyes cold and assessing. "Gerald," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "you've certainly brought something unique to this table. I'd like to extend a special welcome to you, as it seems you've become quite familiar with our family." Gerald shifted uncomfortably, confusion mingling with a dawning realization. Before he could respond, Peter took a step forward, his movement smooth and precise. Without breaking eye contact, he reached for the bowl of tomato soup in front of Gerald and, with a swift motion, appended it into Gerald's lap, the steaming liquid splashing over him and eliciting a shocked gasp from the guests. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps and exclamations filled the air as guests rose from their seats, stunned by the sudden turn of events. The once serene dining room was now a tableau of confusion and disbelief, the clatter of cutlery and overturned chairs adding to the cacophony. "Well, dumbass, welcome to the family. I hope you both enjoy your last dinner together," Peter said, and then promptly dunked his face into a bowl of hot tomato soup. Gerald stumbled backward, his expression a mix of outrage and humiliation, soup dripping from his chin and staining his clothes. He sputtered, trying to regain his composure, but the damage was done. His confidence shattered by the public humiliation. Peter stood his ground, his expression unreadable, a calm amidst the storm he had unleashed. His eyes flicked to Sherry, who sat frozen in her seat, her face pale as the reality of the situation sank in. The facade she had maintained for so long crumbled, and she felt the weight of her actions bearing down on her, her cheeks flushed with shame. The guests, initially shocked into silence, began to murmur among themselves, their voices a mixture of sympathy for Peter and condemnation for Sherry and Gerald. Friends and family who had known the couple for years struggled to reconcile the scene before them with the image of the perfect couple they had always admired. Sherry stood, her voice shaking as she attempted to regain control of the situation. "Peter, please, this isn't the time or place." Peter cut her off, his voice as sharp as a blade. "When, then, Sherry? When is the right time to confront betrayal and deceit? In private, where it can fester unnoticed, or here, where the truth can finally be laid bare?" Tears welled in Sherry's eyes, her composure slipping further as she realized the depth of Peter's anger and hurt. She turned to Gerald, seeking some form of support, but found only his retreating figure, desperate to escape the scene. Guests began to gather their belongings, murmuring apologies and farewells as they left, giving Peter space to deal with the aftermath of his revelation. Some paused to offer a comforting word or a supportive pat on the shoulder, their loyalty evident in their actions. As the last of the guests departed, the house fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. Peter remained standing, surveying the wreckage of the evening, the overturned chairs and spilled wine a metaphor for the upheaval in his life. Sherry approached him, her voice tentative, filled with regret. "Peter, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." Peter met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "Sorry isn't enough, Sherry. You've shattered the trust we built our life on, and it's going to take more than apologies to fix what's broken." The confrontation had left its mark on both of them, an indelible stain that would not easily be washed away. But amidst the chaos, Peter felt a sense of clarity and resolve. He would face this storm and emerge stronger, guided by the principles he had always held dear. The dinner party was over, but the confrontation was only the beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and difficult choices. But Peter was ready to face it, armed with the truth and determined to rebuild his life on his terms. Peter Holloway stood in the midst of the chaos, his heart still pounding with adrenaline and emotion. He watched as the last of their friends disappeared into the night, leaving behind a silence that was both deafening and suffocating. The dinner party had unraveled spectacularly, and Peter knew there was no going back to the way things were. He turned his attention to Sherry, who stood by the window, her face a mask of shock and regret. The once confident woman now appeared small and vulnerable, her eyes filled with unshed tears. Peter took a deep breath, summoning the strength to confront the woman he once believed he would spend the rest of his life with. "We need to talk," Peter said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Sherry nodded, her hands twisting nervously as she followed him into the study, a room filled with books and memories, the place where Peter had built his career and, in a way, his life. The room felt different now, tinged with the weight of what had transpired. Peter closed the door behind them, the click of the latch echoing in the stillness. He turned to face Sherry, his expression unreadable, a mixture of hurt and determination. "I know everything, Sherry," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held. "I've seen the messages, the calls. I've been aware for months." Sherry's eyes widened in surprise, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find the right words. "Peter, please, let me explain." "You've had your chance to explain," Peter interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. You had every opportunity to come to me, to talk about whatever it was you were feeling. But you chose deception instead. Sherry's shoulders slumped, and she let out a shuddering breath. I never wanted to hurt you. I got caught up in something I couldn't control, and before I knew it, I was in too deep. Peter shook his head, his disappointment palpable. You made choices, Sherry. You prioritized your desires over our marriage, over the trust we built. Do you understand what you've done? She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I do, and I'm so sorry, Peter. I know I've hurt you, and I'll do anything to make it right. Peter's heart ached at the sight of her pain, but he steeled himself, knowing that this was necessary. Making it right might not be possible, Sherry. You've shattered our foundation, and it's going to take more than words to rebuild it. As the conversation continued, Peter felt his anger begin to settle, replaced by a cold, calculated clarity. He knew he couldn't afford to let his emotions dictate his actions. His future, his career, and his reputation depended on how he handled this situation. We need to talk about what happens next, Peter said, his voice firm as he shifted into the strategic mindset that had served him so well in his career. We'll have to discuss a separation and, potentially, a divorce. Sherry's face crumpled at the words, but she nodded, understanding that there was no other path forward. I'll do whatever you think is best, Peter. I just want to make things right. Peter nodded, already formulating a plan in his mind. We'll need to be discreet about this. The last thing I want is for this to become public fodder. My career, our assets, everything will need to be handled carefully. He spent the next few hours laying out his thoughts, considering every angle, every possible outcome. He knew the legal implications, the division of their assets, and the potential impact on his professional reputation. Every decision had to be calculated, every move carefully planned. The following morning, Peter met with his most trusted friends and colleagues, those who had stood by him through countless challenges in his career. They gathered in his office, a space that had witnessed many victories and now bore witness to one of his most personal battles. I need your advice, Peter began, his voice steady as he addressed the room. I'm facing a difficult situation, and I need to know my options. His friends listened attentively, offering insights and support. They discussed the potential legal proceedings, the importance of confidentiality, and the steps Peter could take to protect his interests. Peter, you've always been the strategist, his friend Tom remarked, leaning forward with a thoughtful expression. Use that to your advantage. You know how to play this game better than anyone. Peter nodded, absorbing their advice. He knew he was not alone in this fight, that he had a network of people who believed in him and would help him navigate the turbulent waters ahead. As the meeting drew to a close, Peter felt a renewed sense of purpose. The confrontation at the dinner party had been the catalyst for change, but now it was time to focus on the future. He was determined to rebuild his life, to learn from the pain and emerge stronger than before. That evening, as he sat alone in his study, Peter allowed himself a moment of reflection. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. He would face each challenge with the same determination that had driven him to success in his career. With a deep breath, he rose from his chair, knowing that the aftermath of the confrontation was not an end but a beginning, a chance to forge a new path, one that would lead him toward healing and redemption. In the days that followed the confrontation, Peter Holloway immersed himself in the intricacies of his plan, driven by a sense of justice and the need for closure. His legal expertise, honed over years of navigating complex cases, was now his greatest ally. He was determined not only to end his marriage with Sherry on his own terms, but also to ensure that Gerald faced the consequences of his actions. Peter's reputation and future demanded nothing less than a meticulously crafted strategy. Sitting in his study, surrounded by books and legal documents, Peter began piecing together every detail he had gathered about Gerald's business dealings. He had known for some time that Gerald's reputation was built on a fragile foundation, teetering on the brink of collapse. Rumors of unethical practices and questionable partnerships had reached Peter's ears, but he had never paid them much heed until now. He meticulously compiled evidence, connecting the dots that would expose Gerald's misdeeds. Financial records, email correspondences, and witness statements painted a damning picture of corruption and deceit. Peter knew that a carefully timed revelation could topple Gerald's career, ensuring that he paid the price for his betrayal. With his evidence in hand, Peter reached out to a trusted journalist, someone he knew would handle the story with integrity. He provided the information anonymously, ensuring that Gerald's downfall would come from an external source, distancing himself from the direct fallout. The story was too compelling to ignore, and Peter knew that once it broke, Gerald's reputation would be irreparably damaged. As the article gained traction, whispers turned into headlines. Gerald's unethical dealings were laid bare for the world to see, tarnishing his image and leading to investigations that would haunt him for years to come. The professional and personal circles Gerald once thrived and now turned against him, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Peter watched from a distance, his emotions a complex mix of satisfaction and melancholy. He had achieved what he set out to do, ensuring that Gerald and Sherry faced the consequences of their actions. Yet, revenge, while sweet, did not fill the void left by betrayal. It was merely a step toward his own healing. While the world around him buzzed with news of the scandal, Peter focused on the next phase of his journey, rebuilding his life. The pain of betrayal lingered, but he refused to let it define him. Instead, he sought solace in the unwavering support of his friends and family, their presence a balm for his wounded heart. He began reaching out to old friends, those whose relationships had suffered during the tumultuous years of his marriage. Lunches, dinners, and casual get-togethers slowly reconnected him with the people who had once been integral to his life. He was reminded of the value of genuine relationships, those built on trust and mutual respect. In his professional life, Peter found new purpose. His experiences gave him a unique perspective on trust and betrayal, one he used to guide others navigating similar challenges. Clients who found themselves in difficult situations benefited from Peter's empathy and expertise, as he helped them maneuver through personal and professional crises. His reputation as a lawyer grew, not just as a formidable opponent in court, but as a compassionate advocate who truly understood the complexities of human relationships. Months passed, and with them came a gradual sense of closure. Peter's life, once defined by a relationship shattered by deceit, now embraced new opportunities and possibilities. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, his resilience a testament to his character and determination. As the anniversary of the ill-fated dinner approached, Peter found himself reflecting on the journey he had traveled. The pain, though still present, was now a whisper rather than a shout, a reminder of what he had endured and overcome. He had learned to forgive himself for the anger and hurt that had consumed him, understanding that healing was a journey, not a destination. One afternoon, while sitting in a local coffee shop, Peter struck up a conversation with a woman at the next table. Her name was Beth, an artist with a warm smile and a quick wit. Their conversation flowed easily, laughter punctuating their exchange as they discussed art, literature, and life's unexpected twists. It was a chance encounter, but as they exchanged numbers and agreed to meet again, Peter felt a flicker of hope for the future. With Beth, Peter found a connection that was both refreshing and promising. They spent time exploring galleries and attending book readings, their shared interests forming a solid foundation for what would become a meaningful relationship. Beth's presence was a reminder that love, when built on trust and authenticity, could be a source of joy and fulfillment. The story of Peter Holloway, once marred by betrayal and heartbreak, was now one of renewal and resilience. He had navigated the complexities of his past, crafted his own justice, and emerged on the other side with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. His life was not defined by the betrayal he had suffered, but by the strength and determination with which he faced it.